In this edition of Southern Newsweek, protesters raise concerns about gas drilling off the Otago coast, school teachers get a boost in their knowledge of local geology, and a residential Dunedin city garden becomes an orchard. Kia ora, I'm Daryl Baser. Gas prospecting company OMV has begun drilling at the Tawhaki 1 site 146 kilometres off the Otago coast. A protest was held in Dunedin's Octagon on Thursday, raising concerns about the company's drilling and plans for gas exploration. Environmental protesters call on oil and natural gas company OMV to cease drilling for gas off the Otago coast in the Southern Ocean.
Because OMV are right out there in the Great South Basin right now, and we want to just bring that awareness to people, and we've got our own oil rig.
Pro-Gas Otago spokesman and Dunedin City Councillor Andrew Wiley says there's a vast gulf between oil drilling and gas drilling, but he believes change is coming.
We do need to look at progressive ways of changing our current use of energy. Coal and oil just do not cut it, in my opinion. Gas is a natural transition. It's a perfect transition for where we need to go over the next 10, 20 years. We have targets to meet for 2050. Those are the targets we really have to work towards.
Wiley says the drilling program off the coast could potentially generate $30 billion over the life of the field. He believes protesters from oil-free Otago are misguided and would welcome a robust conversation with them.
I'd really like us to have a real serious discussion about gas exploration and the benefits for gas of our city. It is a gas find they're looking for. They're looking for gas to basically help not only our country, but countries especially through Asia. There's markets for the gas that would greatly reduce our carbon footprint in those areas.
As protesters assembled today in the Octagon, Oil-Free Otago spokesperson and OMV's most wanted Jack Brazil says it's not just one company to blame, as global change is needed.
Recognising that it's a system that's causing this and we're all part of that system. So, we, as was said before, you don't have to be a carbon Jesus to try and change that system. Participating in the system as it is doesn't disqualify you from trying to change it.
A prospecting ship and support vessels have begun operating more than 140 kilometres off the Otago coast, with test results due around mid-February. Protesters say natural gas exploration is just as bad as oil or coal and have further protests planned around the south. OMV has approval for up to 10 exploratory wells to test for economically viable quantities of gas in the area, costing around $80 million. In Dunedin, the South Today. A University of Otago field trip to Brighton this week armed a group of secondary school teachers with techniques for teaching geology in the classroom. The trip was part of the university's annual Advanced School Sciences Academy, which engages senior secondary school pupils and their teachers in a week of science-based learning.
A group of secondary school teachers learn a few techniques for teaching earth science yesterday at Brighton Beach, south of Dunedin. University of Otago Geology Department teaching fellow Dr. Sophie Briggs says Brighton Beach has several interesting geological features.
This is a really good place to see one of the oldest rocks that we can see in New Zealand, the Haast Schist. And we can also see here a paleo beach that was deposited in the last interglacial period, so the one before the one that we're in now. And we can see loess deposits that represent the last glacial maximum.
Dr. Briggs says the area is also a great place to view evidence of the Akatori fault line, which could generate a magnitude 7 earthquake, seriously impacting Dunedin.
During the last 2 earthquakes that happened on this fault in the last 1300 years or so, they experienced about 2 metres of slip in an earthquake, and that actually offset the marine terrace that seaweed was growing on.
The fault is interesting not only from a geological perspective, but also a biological one.
The geneticists were able to show that the kelp or the seaweed growing on the uplifted side of the fault was genetically distinct to that growing on the other side of the fault. So there's a biological fingerprint of earthquake movement happening on this fault in the past, which I think is really cool, and it just shows how biology and geology can work together to solve interesting problems.
The University of Otago Academy has been running since 2011 and aims to support science education in rural and provincial areas. In Dunedin, the South Today.
It's the dawning of a new era as the space age is set to take off at Oamaru Airport. A memorandum of understanding between the Waitaki District Council and aerospace company Dawn Aerospace could mean spaceflight from the North Otago town later this year.
One small step for man, one giant leap for Oamaru. Waitaki Mayor Gary Kershaw signs a memorandum with Dawn Aerospace giving the green light for launching the space company's new prototype rocket planes from Oamaru Airport. It could bring dozens of high-paying jobs and a multi-million-dollar industry to the district.
All going well, Dawn Aerospace is poised to become a valued company within the Waitaki district and yet another company that we can look to proudly and say that's part of Waitaki.
Modern satellites are about the size of a microwave oven, and Dawn Aerospace General Manager James Powell says his company's reusable 5-metre-long remote-controlled rocket plane will be much cheaper than conventional rockets for putting satellites into space. And he's hoping to begin testing the plane this year.
An initial flight won't be to space, but the plan is to start flying that, nice and low and slow and safe and easy, and then progressively expand that flight envelope until we are doing the suborbital flights.
The rocket plane is privately funded by a Christchurch and Netherlands-based company, with support from the European Space Agency, and is similar in loudness to other aircraft.
It's really designed to be just like a conventional aircraft, so it's conventional jet is pretty loud, but manageable, and so in our system will be the same. That again, yep, it's definitely loud, but it's the same as a jet.
All going well, the space plane will be able to launch twice a day if required, and be reused hundreds of times in an environmentally friendly way.
Like a really fundamental and important thing about Dawn is that we're building a very, very scalable system. This is not something that we want to build and launch in the middle of a desert only, because that wouldn't be a scalable system. There's not deserts all over the place to fly out of. So this fundamentally has to be something that works with everyone and everyone can tolerate.
Dawn Aerospace hope to begin building an operations base at Oamaru next year and establish a significant operation within 3 to 5 years. In Oamaru, the South Today.
The last place you'd ever expect to find an orchard is in the backyard of a Dunedin property right in the middle of the student quarter. But that's exactly what Rory Hardening has created at his George Street home.
The last place you might expect to find an orchard is in the backyard of a Dunedin home, right smack bang in the middle of the city's student quarter. But that's exactly what Rory Harding has created at his George Street home.
Well, it started when I decided to move in about 11 years ago, and I wanted to do something about learning how to grow my own food, and started collecting fruit, and just steamrolled from there.
A passion for gardening has helped Harding cover the 500 square metre property with about 300 square metres of edible plants, growing heirloom apples, feijoas, kiwi fruit and plums, and all of it organic.
There was a big lawn down the middle and a small veggie garden down the back, contained by those 60s style concrete paths, and an ornamental border down that side, and a cluster of random trees over here.
A rainwater collection system means even during the most dry periods, the orchard receives more than enough water. Concrete walls and fences around the neighbouring properties shield the orchard from the bitter southerly winds, creating a nano-climate.
Staying adaptable, I think, is important, not taking anything for granted, keeping tabs on it and making sure it's working for what we need, which is getting fed and doing it biologically.
As well as giving away any unused food him and his family can't eat or preserve, Harding hosts workshops and tours of the orchard, teaching others how to grow edible plants. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come on this edition of Southern Newsweek, a Kingfish Court in Otago Harbour sparks questions about global warming, and a Wanaka metal sculptor draws inspiration from the animal kingdom. See you after the break. Professor Steve Wing says these waters were once too cold for the likes of kingfish, but a massive kingfish was exactly what visiting retired pastor hauled up from Port Chalmers this week. Retired pastor Peter Toisano couldn't wipe the smile off his face after hauling up a nearly 12-kilogram kingfish on Monday. Once a rare visitor to this part of the world, the warm water species is now becoming a common sight on the end of fishing rods.
Yeah, I just let it down with the head of the wharf. I let the current take my bait right around under the big wharf, and suddenly my float went down and I didn't get it. I just whined it to check the bait and I feel something heavy.
Professor Steve Wing of the University of Otago Marine Science Department says climate change is a likely main reason why kingfish are now seen off the Otago coast. He says southern waters were previously considered too cold for the species, along with other fish previously landed off the North Island like kahawai. Toisano was unsure what was at the end of his line, but his experience told him it was something large.
This I didn't even know that was a kingfish. I thought it was a barracuda or a stingray until I fight for half an hour and I managed to bring it up on the surface, and people were shouting out that, oh, there's a kingfish. And that's how I get it.
After catching his first kingfish, he's also feeling positive about his prospects for the 2-day Otago Harbour salmon fishing competition next month, which he plans to enter before heading home to Wellington. In Dunedin, the South Today. 4 Southern firefighters have returned home after 14 days of the hardest job they'd ever had. The group were among 21 firefighting volunteers deployed to Australia by Fire and Emergency New Zealand.
Southland firefighter Nigel Milne working hard creating a fire break in Australia recently. 4 of the 21 firefighters who volunteered to help fight the recent Australian bushfires are glad to be back home after long and hard days of digging fire breaks across the forest.
Oh, it was a great experience. Yeah, it was one of the harder deployments we'd been on probably. A lot of hand tool work. The boys did really well with that.
Over the 2 weeks away, the group were completely focused on their mission.
It gets very tiring. You're shattered by the time you get home. But the long hours and the heat, they take their toll after a while.
Keenan says they were impressed by the support of the local communities they'd flown over to help.
How the community pulls together is always it's amazing. How they back up their fireys and help them any way they can.
It's thought the fires will continue to burn for another few months at least. In Invercargill, the South Today.
An appreciation of anatomy and a love for animals is central to the craft of a Wanaka-based sculptor. Adam Humphries uses welding equipment to transform raw steel into dynamic sculptures which look like they're poised to take flight.
A steel sculpture signifying the puddles of water formed by a horse dripping from the rain. Just one of the many artworks by Wanaka man Adam Humphries. When he finished school in Wales, he had no plans to become an artist, instead choosing to work in forestry. But travelling around the world, Humphries often found himself using chainsaws to create wood sculptures in his free time.
I started chainsaw carving on a farm in Australia that actually was part of a gallery, the Crisp Galleries, and they very kindly gave me my first ever exhibition, and that was when the light bulb moment just went, and I thought, wow, you can make a living doing this.
Now he's swapped wood for steel for making his sculptures, which are on display in various places around the world.
They're two wonderfully contrasting ideas, and the chainsawing has always been, you have the block of wood and you chip away, so you're detracting, you're taking away from it constantly, whereas the steel, you're adding.
These days he's often busy creating commissioned artworks, which are very variable in how long they take to make.
There's just so much inspiration around growing up with animals. I'm constantly trying to capture movement, and that's quite often in there can be a lot of movement in an animal standing still, which sounds a bit crazy, but just little things move. And so without studying art, I studied the animals and I studied my surroundings, and I think that's really paying off now.
And when he's not working on commissioned pieces, he says he always has plenty of other ideas for his art.
Some sculptures can be remarkably quick, and I can produce them in a week if it's something that's just flowing really well and I know the subject really well. But if it's something a bit more technical, it takes me longer. It can take it's impossible to know, which is what makes quoting so hard, because essentially you win some and you lose some, and hopefully that all balances out.
Humphries' imaginative artworks can be seen at the workshops of Metalworks Wanaka. In Wanaka, the South today.
Still to come after the break on Southern Newsweek, school pupils avoid holiday boredom with board games, and steampunkers enjoy summery weather with a high tea at Dunedin's Botanic Garden. The sky could be the limit for a fantasy role-playing game created in the 1970s. These school holidays, a local dungeon master is sharing his Dungeons & Dragons experience points with some younger fighting fantasy fans. Life and death at the roll of a dice. These days it's uncommon to see groups of people hunched over paper and pen, but Dungeon Master Tim Plaisted says it's one of the things which drew him to the game about 5 years ago.
There's something about sitting down around a table with a whole bunch of mates, just talking trash and eating snacks while you scribble on pieces of paper and roll dice. It's pretty basic, it's pretty cool.
It's more than 40 years since Americans Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson first published the tabletop fantasy role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons in 1974. Plaisted is sharing his love of the role-playing game with a group of aspiring youngsters over the summer holidays in the teen space at the Dunedin Public Library.
At the moment we're running over how to make a character, so it's quite intense for newbies, lots of rules and dice and numbers and lots of trying to figure out what you want to be.
He says although these teens could typically be absorbed in their digital devices, this group are all adapting well to using pencils and paper. And Plaisted says younger people can seem more at ease role-playing as any type of character.
Like people are a lot more accepting of everything, and then playing D&D or something like D&D, you get to choose your identity in a whole new world. You can be a different race, and people won't bat an eyelid.
Plaisted says the game itself is adapting digital technology, with groups playing across town or even across the world via live streams.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of podcasts and YouTube channels where people just play D&D. Like a big group of people get around a table with a camera on it and just play D&D online. People watch them. It's pretty cool. It's quite nerdy. It's pretty cool. It's very nerdy.
He says the sky could be the limit with fifth generation or 5G technology. Maybe science fiction could become science fact.
So something like the Harry Potter chess where you control the characters and the players move around, and across between maybe like Star Wars, the game on with Han Solo and the Falcon, where they all smash each other with clubs and shit. So got to stop soon, but yeah.
He says the University of Otago has a Dungeons & Dragons club, and he also enjoys playing with groups of friends. In Dunedin, the South Today. He may be one of the young bucks within his car club, but Cromwell's Lee Jackson adores the old-school charm of hot rods. It's a love affair which is proving contagious, with his 1967 Ford Galaxy XL 500 Coupe receiving the People's Choice Awards at the annual Cromwell Classic Car and Hot Rod Festival recently. Cromwell classic car lover Lee Jackson has owned this mobile piece of art for 9 months and was proud to be one of 680 entrants to the Cromwell Classic Car and Hot Rod Festival. He says it's lucky there are so many passionate car experts so close to his home.
Picked it up and basically engaged some of the local craftsmen here that are sort of experts in the car. So I've been lucky enough to be able to find some of the best leading guys in the business that are all actually locals, which were fantastic.
Sporting a sleek maroon paint job, the freshly done up car attracted plenty of interest from intrigued onlookers. Jackson says with a number of craftsmen on board, the last 9 months have been a labour of love.
So all the mechanical aspects of the car and tidy up job as far as the mechanics go have been done by Gary Garage with Gary Little. As far as the body and the shaping and getting all the lines right and repainted and stuff like that, that was done by a local guy here, Lee Martin.
He says newer cars just don't have the same personality, and he spent a considerable amount of money doing this one up. Despite owning the best car in show, he was full of praise for all the other vehicles on display.
I guess there's some amazing cars here, there really is, and I mean in terms of the interior and bits and pieces out there, there's some amazing jobs.
A crowd of around 2,000 sizzled in the sunshine throughout the day as temperatures reached around 28 degrees. Event spokesman Greg Mullane says the festival has gone from strength to strength.
When you come along, you might see an Austin A40 Farina, something that you had as a young person that you used to drive, and there'll be some sort of connection with a car here for everybody today, whether it's something you own, something you aspire to own.
He says the long-running event is widely supported by many southern businesses and is a firm fixture on the car show calendar. The festival coincided with Speedworks Motorsport NZ Championship at Highlands Motorsport Park, which concluded yesterday. In Cromwell, the South Today. Skipping ropes and croquet were just some of the entertainment at a Victorian-style tea in Dunedin last weekend. Around 20 members of Dunedin's Steampunk Society made the most of a sunny Sunday at the Botanic Gardens to enjoy entertainment without electrical gadgets.
The Dunedin Steampunk Society celebrating Sunday's lovely weather with family entertainment. No batteries required.
Not a lot of big groups that do things with families and involve the kids in that sort of thing, and so having the kids out and having a bit of fun and not sitting in front of a screen is probably a huge thing for me.
A high tea outing is held by the group about 3 or 4 times a year. The Society's president James Bryan says steampunk aficionados tend to differ in their focus from country to country.
But we go with the Victorian science fiction as a basic theme, and we dress in Victorian style, the women with their big dresses, the guys in top hats and suit-ish looking or sport over the top. The brighter and louder, the better.
He says reusing old items is important to the group, with old copper water pipe and brass vases creating the hoops of this croquet set, and the mallet handle being made out of a walking stick.
You recycle. A lot of the steampunk themed stuff is all about recycling. The girls' dresses are generally made from duvet covers, bedspreads, curtains.
The Dunedin Steampunk Society has about 30 members, and they will be making their next public appearance at Thieves Alley Markets Day in Dunedin's Octagon in the middle of February. In Dunedin, the South Today.
That wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great night. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.